Okay, so picture this. An entire town, more than 100 people, just gone. Vanished without a trace. And no, this isn't the plot of some new streaming show. It's one of America's oldest, most haunting real-life mysteries. Today, we are heading back in time, over 400 years, to the lost colony of Roanoke, a story about big dreams, a lot of hope, and a disappearance that still has us scratching our heads. And that's really the question that just grabs you, isn't it? I mean, we're not talking about a couple of explorers who wandered off. This was a whole community, men, women, and even children, who just seemed to evaporate from the face of the earth, leaving behind, well, almost nothing. You have to imagine the scene. A rescue party finally shows up, years late, and they find this settlement that's just eerily quiet. All the houses are gone, the people are gone, but then they spot something that stops them dead in their tracks. A single cryptic clue. That's it. Just this one word, Croatoan, carved into a wooden post. This is the only message the colonists left behind. It's the one and only thread we've been pulling on for 4 centuries, trying to unravel this whole thing. So to really get what this word might mean, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the man who found it. That man was John White. He was the colony's governor, and he was coming back to find not just his people, but his own daughter and granddaughter, completely gone. You know, what's so wild about the scene is the complete lack of chaos. There were no bodies, no signs of a fight. The houses hadn't been burned down or anything. They'd been carefully taken apart. And this distress signal they'd agreed on, a carved cross, was nowhere to be found. There was only that single, baffling word.
Now, for John White, this clue wasn't terrifying. It was actually hopeful. See, Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, and it was also the name of the Native American tribe that lived there, a tribe the English were on pretty good terms with. So his first thought was, okay, they just moved. They want to go live with their friends. So the clue pointed to a peaceful move. But that just brings up a much bigger question, right? Why were these English families way out here in the first place, on this remote island so incredibly far from home? To understand what happened to them, we've got to understand why they came. It really all boils down to geopolitics. This was the age of empire building. Spain was getting super rich and powerful from its colonies in the Americas, and England, led by Queen Elizabeth I, was absolutely determined not to get left in the dust. The New World was the next great chessboard in their global rivalry. So yeah, this was not just some leisurely exploration. Sir Walter Raleigh, the guy bankrolling the whole mission, had some very clear goals. He wanted a base to spread English influence, a place to find riches like gold, and maybe a convenient spot to launch raids on Spanish treasure ships. Roanoke was basically England's opening move in the great game of empire.
Now, an earlier attempt to set up a military-style fort on Roanoke, well, it had failed spectacularly. So in 1587, they decided to try something different. This time, they weren't just sending soldiers. They sent a whole community, one that was meant to be permanent. And really, the passenger list tells you everything you need to know. This wasn't a military outpost. It was supposed to be a town. The fact that there were women and children on board was a huge signal. They were there to put down roots and build a new life in America. And that new life was symbolized by a birth. Little Virginia Dare, the granddaughter of the governor John White himself. Her birth was this huge symbol of hope, you know, the promise of a brand new English generation, born in a new world. For their leader, this made the stakes incredibly personal. But that hope turned to desperation pretty fast. The colony was running low on supplies, so John White sailed back to England for what he thought would be a quick round trip. But then, disaster strikes. England goes to war with Spain, and every single ship is taken over by the Navy to fight the famous Spanish Armada. John White was stuck. He couldn't get back to his family for 3 long, agonizing years. And that brings us right back to 1590, with John White standing in that empty settlement. And the tragic part is, he never even got to investigate the Croatoan clue himself. A massive storm blew in and forced his ship to leave. And just like that, a 400-year-old cold case began, built on just a couple of clues and a whole lot of theories. So let's look at the evidence. We've got 2 carvings, the full word Croatoan on the main post, and then just the letter CRO on a tree nearby. You know, you have to wonder, was this a message they started in a hurry and then finished more carefully later? For John White, this was all the proof he needed that his people had left a deliberate trail for him to follow. Okay, so let's break down the leading theories. The most popular one, and the one John White believed, is that they simply packed up and went to live with the friendly Croatoan tribe. Makes sense, right? But what if the carving was a trap, or a desperate clue pointing to their attackers? Maybe they were wiped out by a different, less friendly tribe. Or, hey, maybe the enemy wasn't human at all. A monster hurricane could have flattened the settlement, or some New World disease could have swept through. And then there's the simplest and maybe saddest possibility, that after 3 years of waiting for a resupply that never showed up, they just ran out of food. So why, after all this time, are we still so obsessed with this story? I think it's because it's so much more than just a historical puzzle. It's really about what the story of Roanoke represents to us. The story of the lost colony is just this stark reminder of how brutal and dangerous that whole era was. It really shines a light on the incredible risks these people took, the critical importance of their relationships, good and bad, with Native Americans, and it shows us how our entire version of a historical event can hinge on one single ambiguous word. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? We like our history to have neat and tidy answers. But Roanoke doesn't give us that. It forces us to accept that some stories just don't have a final chapter. And maybe that uncertainty is exactly what makes it so fascinating. You know, with new archaeology and new technology, it's actually possible we might find a real answer someday. But for now, the fate of those 117 men, women, and children remains America's oldest, most haunting question mark. So what do you think happened to the lost colony?